Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells, and I have a very special guest tonight, a first-timer here on the program. This is a person who I met through theater, and actually I have a little story about that I'm going to tell you along with everybody else. Her name is Lilith Beest, or as I like to call her, Lil Beesty. It's okay to laugh.
I accept that. I don't know why I was like, I'm just going to make a face into the ether.
Yeah, I think that's a cute name. And it would sound good if we had like a rap album. Eric D featuring Lil Beesty.
Well, now we need to do that.
So, I met you doing theater several years ago in a now legendary production of The Bacchae.
Legendary.
Yeah. And I have a little confession to make. When I first met you, I was like, oh, she's really cute. And then what really sealed the deal was I noticed you were wearing a pendant with Vincent Price on it. And I won't name names, but I remember talking to another male cast member and being like, this chick seems super cool because she's really pretty and she's wearing a fucking Vincent Price pendant. Like, sign me up.
I would like to subscribe to your newsletter.
Unfortunately, I had some stuff going on with somebody else at the time. And then I found out you were all booed up anyway, so oh well. But I'm happy that we became friends anyway.
I am too.
And now we basically see each other in lines.
Yes, yes.
That's the other thing. I get notifications all the time via Facebook about what you're up to. We obviously have very similar interests because I am constantly getting notified. And this is not something that I wasn't like... You're not one of my like starred friends or whatever that feature is, but I constantly like will get a little reminder like, hey, Lilith is interested in an event near you. And, you know, and I'm just like, oh, great. Like what? But then I like check. I'm like, oh yeah, I am kind of interested in that.
Perhaps I'll see her in line.
Yeah. But it's always a pleasant surprise to see. Not really a surprise at this point. It's always pleasant to see you in line. All right. So, Lilith, if you could fill everybody in on what it is that you do exactly, because I think there's a lot of... Well, go ahead and tell everyone what you do, and then I'm going to talk about it.
Okay. In general, I am a face maker and noise maker. That's kind of how I would define myself. But what I do is I am an actor, a burlesque and drag performer, and show producer. I think that's... Unfortunately, it's a little bit of everything, but that's kind of the best way to wrap it all up. And in fact, I do have an upcoming Mad Max burlesque variety themed show Friday, July 6th at Oberon Theater called Witness the Wasteland. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm very excited, and you should come.
I have gone to burlesque performances before, and I'm sure I know many of the people involved with your show and on many of the burlesque shows. And I have to say, the very first time I saw burlesque, I, again, don't want to name names, but it wasn't the people that are generally associated with you and your friends.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. Like, I was glad that they were happy enough with their bodies that they were able to go out and flounce around for a while, but it was terrible. And then I went to one of the ones that Mary Widow was involved in because Emily had done the costumes or something. I forget why we ended up going, but I went with Emily, frequent podcast guest and also costume designer. And it was like night and day. Mm-hmm. Like, it was a really well-produced, well-choreographed. The people were talented, and they didn't look too bad neither. It was fun.
I must interject for a moment and say that anyone of any size or shape or ability can do burlesque. I do burlesque, and there's no tease in my burlesque. I tend to use it as an art medium to like expose facets of humanity, as opposed to, that sounds so pretentious, but like I don't know how to say it. Like sometimes for example,
You use it as an art form.
I use it as an art form. When I strip, I'm exposing something unexpected, because I'm an asshole and I'm not going to show anybody anything.
I do remember you being a little bit prudish during the Bacchae.
Yeah, no, I'm actually
and I was surprised.
a big prude.
Yeah.
For example, I have an act that I do that's a witch act, and I come out. I start out in the center, and the lights come up, and I like do a bunch of weird movements, and then someone comes over and rips off the shawl that I'm wearing, and there's a pentagram tattoo on my back, and like that's all of the stripping that happens, but it's to expose this thing anyway. But what I will say is that oftentimes I think a lot of performers get distracted and think that burlesque is about like specific dance moves or costume elements, and don't bring any passion or have anything to say.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I just want to go back and say that I was totally not trying to body shame anyone, but what I am saying is there should be some kind of, I think either a passion about why you're showing what you're showing, or some kind of artistry attached to it.
Yes.
And to me, then it doesn't matter, because even in the troupes that I am talking about that I do enjoy, there are people of all shapes and sizes and genders. But this troupe in particular, the first one that I saw that I said was bad, they didn't have any of that. I think they were going more for shock value.
Oh.
So I think it was more like, oh, isn't it like scandalous that we're taking off our clothes?
You're like, not really. That's what I paid for.
Yeah, no, I've seen boobs before. It's all good.
I have the internet.
Yeah. What I was going to say before all that was that I think that there is a big crossover between horror people and burlesque people. It seems, not that I know everybody, but the burlesque performers that I know tend to be into horror.
I would definitely agree with that.
You know, this is who we are.
Yeah.
Like, I may not be a burlesque performer, but you know, I am one of you in that way. Like yes. Just we're all gonna get along. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, all right. Enough of that jibber jabber. Let me just tell everybody to visit the website spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, sometimes find outtakes and pictures and all kinds of goodies. And you can also find links to our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Instagram and Twitter. And please don't forget to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. Now, Lilith, you've come here today to basically...
You can call me Beast.
Okay. Can I call you Beastie?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Beastie, you've come here today to basically give us some book reports.
I have, yes.
This is good. This is for all you literary motherfuckers out there.
And people who maybe want to get into horror but aren't into horror movies or video games or anything like that. I have a lot of friends who like the idea of things and will maybe just like read the Wikipedia page so they can like stay current, but don't necessarily want to see a lot of gore or people getting actually attacked. So sometimes the first book that I want to talk about is actually, I think, a great introduction to the concept of slashers and final girls. And it's just a quick, fun read that has some exciting things in it that are fun to visualize and maybe really good for someone who doesn't necessarily like want to see women being stabbed in film.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So anyway.
So tell us about it.
All right. So this book is called Final Girls, and it's by Riley Sager. Ooh, who's that, you ask? This is actually a pseudonym for an author who has previously published under another name. So this is his first like horror book. And I will say that it does kind of read as someone's first horror book. This isn't something that I would recommend to someone who is really familiar with slashers, really loves the concept of final girls and is like into them and knows all of their history or something. This is a much better book for someone who has not been introduced to those things. The plot of this book is about this woman who you're introduced to her. She has had a traumatic experience where she ended up being essentially a final girl, which is, let me back up.
Is it like how it would like relate to a horror movie?
Yeah.
Where there's the lone female survivor?
Exactly. So a slasher is a movie where there's like a guy usually in some sort of mask that just like goes on a killing spree and kills everyone. A final girl is usually the last female, the last survivor of this type of thing, generally female. And in this book, final girls are a thing that actually exist. So in this case, there are 3 final girls. The media loves them because it's such a kind of sexy story of like, oh, she survived this horrible experience. It's so brave, so wonderful. One of them has gone on to become kind of a motivational speaker and encourages women across the world to be more empowered and take control of their lives. One has basically become a recluse, and the main character that you are reading through her eyes, she doesn't actually remember her experience at all. She blacked out everything from the experience. So, and she's very grateful for that. She's like, all of my friends died, super sucks, but I don't remember it. So I'm not traumatized by this. I'm not a final girl. I don't know what happened. I just want to live a normal life like a normal girl. The plot of the book is her kind of understanding what it means and going from a person who is in denial about who they are and feels disempowered to becoming empowered kind of at the end. Very much a fun thriller kind of mystery as you figure out her past and unearth all of these different things. And I was surprised at the end at the different revelations that happen. I don't know who the original author is, but I definitely sometimes was reading it trying to figure out if it was a man or a woman writer.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of times where I was like, oh, this is obviously a man wrote this because of XYZ. I posted on Instagram a passage from the book because the character talks about how she's going to meet up with this guy, and she does her normal routine of brush her teeth, put on her lip gloss, and then take her Xanax. And I was like, you would never take a Xanax after you put it on your lip gloss. You always put your lip gloss on back. It's going to mess everything up. And I was like really furious at this one passage. So, this, obviously a man wrote this. Like,
right.
So.
Very strong feelings about the order of...
I have very strong feelings about a lot of dumb things.
So is the book... Are they in danger, like, currently, or are they just kind of recalling past dangers? Like, is someone trying to get them now that they've survived?
Oh, gotcha. You
Yeah.
mean, like, what's the plot of the fucking book?
Yeah.
So at the very beginning, the final girl who was a motivational speaker is murdered. Or, well, she dies, and it goes back and forth as to how she died, because it was somewhat mysterious circumstances. And so the other two get together and are basically like, I think maybe someone's coming after us. We have to figure out what's going on. And the other one is like, you have to remember what happened to you, because maybe that'll be a clue and that'll help you heal your trauma. And the main character is like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm fine. I have a bakery blog where I show photos of my beautiful baked goods, and you're coming in here and you're messing up my schedule. And so it's at parts great as a waspy woman to read passages between her and her mom, especially, where her mother is like, you're not a victim, everything's fine, everything's always been fine. And I'm like, hi, Mom. How are you? How did you get in this book? But yeah, so the plot of this book is her trying to figure out if there is someone coming after all of the final girls, and if her life is in danger.
All right, sounds good. Stephen King liked it, apparently.
I'm
just looking at a quote
Stephen
on the...
King's...
Well, actually, maybe they doesn't necessarily mean he liked it, I guess, reading the quote, but go ahead.
When I read it, I was like, oh, Stephen King approved. What he actually said is, if you liked Gone Girl, you'll like this.
Yeah.
Which is not as much of a encouragement as I had anticipated. But I do agree with that, having seen most of the movie Gone Girl, not even all of it, at the gym. It is kind of a mystery. You're following this woman with a mysterious past, and the other final girl, Sam, is maybe trying to pull a grift. The entire time that they're together, you're kind of trying to figure out what her game is. And that's the most interesting and exciting part of it for me.
All right. Anything else to say about that one, or should we move on to the next?
I think we can move on to the
Beastie's
next one.
pick.
Beastie's pick. The next book is my best friend's Exorcism, which my friend and fellow burlesque performer Tuesday Adams recommended to me, and I loved it. I particularly love anything exorcism, like God, Satan, hell, all of that stuff.
I'm with you. All my favorite like horror movies are like The Exorcist, The Omen, Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, that's a good one. So I always love when religion is kind of put into things, and also like fake Satanism in general. There's a lot of like satanic panic in this book. This book, written by Grady Hendrix, who also wrote Horror Store with an umlaut on the last O.
Huh.
It's a like evil IKEA book, I think. This is his second book. This is a great coming of age story that takes place in the 80s of two girls who meet when they're in, I think, third grade. They become best friends, and then most of the rest of it takes place in high school. And lo and behold, one of them becomes possessed, and the other one has to deal with why is her friend acting this way? What can she do to help? No one else can help her. And finally, like, it's her best friend. She's the only one who understands that something really bonkers is going on. Not just normal puberty stuff, but like something is wrong with her friend. And most of the adults in the book, especially her best friend's parents, who are very kind of bougie and waspy, and as long as everything seems like it's fine, they're happy. And the teacher's the same. As long as she's coming to school and she's not disruptive, like, what's the problem? But the main character understands that there's a lot more happening. It's really cute with a lot of references. The chapter name, the name of each chapter, is a pop ballad, like, from that time. It's like one thing leads to another, et cetera, et cetera. It starts off with the main character in third grade throwing like an ET birthday party for herself at a roller rink, and how important that is to her. So it's very nostalgic in a way that I think is really fun.
Well, even just, I mean, looking at the cover is made to look like an old school VHS cover. It's even got the fake stickers on it, like you would see on a VHS. Like they would label it maybe horror or something. This one says a novel, be kind, please rewind. And it even says VHS on it. And the artwork looks like an 80s movie poster. I'd be down for this. Like, just seeing it on the shelf, I'd be like, oh, what is this about? Like, I'm definitely going to check this out. So.
Yeah.
And it's an exorcism. Now, would it be spoiling too much to say how she got possessed?
I don't want to say how she got possessed, but I will say that...
was it a Ouija board?
It was not a Ouija board.
I tried it. It didn't work. I tried to get possessed by a Ouija board. We did it on an episode.
I have friends who are genuinely frightened of Ouija boards, and like, I'm very much of the opinion of like, I don't know what exists and what doesn't, so like, I'm not gonna purposefully try to piss any entities that may or may not exist off, but I don't put a lot of stock into things either.
Okay, anything else about this novel?
I think anyone would enjoy this book. It is a fun, lighter read, but if you like The Exorcism or if you like The Exorcist or other types of movies and stories that revolve around that, this is very much in that vein and going to cater to that. What I really like about it is that even though it's a male author, the two main characters are women, and he portrays them so well that I was like, were you in my high school? Like, I have to assume this guy had older sisters to base their friendship off of, because it's just so real and so authentic in a way that is actually touching. Whereas a lot of the 80s nostalgia stuff that's happening right now, a lot of it's kind of like a little bit kind of fake or cheeky, or like, you remember riding bikes? And it's like, man, I didn't ride my bike that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
I rode my bike all the time.
So this is a very well written book that has a lot of emotional heft that's still really fun and coming of age in an authentic way.
Yeah, I like that idea of like someone who sees that there's something wrong and no one else does. All right, very well. Anything else about my best friend's Exorcism, or shall we move on? I mean, check out the cover. I'll put a picture of it on the website.
Definitely do that.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
So the next book that I want to talk about is called Meddling Kids. And as you can imagine, that's another one that I highly encourage you putting the cover. Yeah,
the cover's cool. The name's cool. Meddling Kids. Obviously, it makes you think of Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Right away. And I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
And that is what it is. So this was written by Edgar Cantero. And this book is basically like a world where the Scooby-Doo gang were real, but whereas they are kind of in their maybe late teens, this group of kids are like 11 and 12 when they have when they solve their last big crime. Whereas, of course, it turns out it was just a man in a mask, and they end up in the newspaper, and everyone loves them. They're heroes. They're heroes to the local community. They think they're really cute. So, cut to 10 years later, they're all kind of real messed up from this experience. They keep going back and thinking like, we caught a guy in a mask, and we know that, he was just trying to find the gold that was in the mine. But like, also there were monsters, like real monsters. And so this kind of follows this group of kids who are now in their kind of mid-20s as they figure out, as they go from like deniers. One of them died from a drug overdose. One of them tried to join the military but was kicked out for rage issues. One of them dropped out of school, and the other one ended up in a mental institution. All of these characters are very well written and take kind of a characteristic from the original Scooby Gang. There's even a dog. And morph them into these very three-dimensional characters that have real cores and relationships between them that are very interesting and well-rounded to read. But the story is equal parts Scooby-Doo and H.P. Lovecraft. And there are monsters, there are, elder gods, there is a Necronomicon-like book that exists that one of the kids reads from because he's an idiot.
Yeah, never read the Necronomicon out loud.
Never do that. I don't care how fun those letters look. Just leave it alone. But that is an absolutely hilarious, at times, self-aware book. Again, the main character is kind of a Vasquez-like character from Aliens. Like, she's just this like real tough broad who gathers everyone back together and basically forces them to say, like, we have to go back to this house. We have to figure out what happened. We have to accept the fact that this was not just a guy in a mask. There's more to this, and we're never going to be whole as people again until we face that. And they do, and it's much wilder than any of them anticipate, and they all kind of go back and forth between, like, I was happy the way I was.
Yeah.
Doing nothing with my life.
So it sounds kind of like a Scooby-Doo meets Lovecraft meets It kind of scenario.
Yeah. This one, it takes place in the early 90s, where it's nice because it's not, just 80s nostalgia, but there are fun references to kind of music and even like the car that they drive kind of mixed throughout, not overwhelmingly so. But they have to do things the old-fashioned way before everyone had smartphones. So they have to like go and find different people to talk to and like do old school, Scooby-Doo like research into like, well, who owns this mine and where can we get, we need the blueprints of this mansion that has underground tunnels and that go under the lake and all this other stuff. It's so fun and funny and hilarious, but is definitely like R-rated for mostly words and like cartoon violence, but also there are some adult relations as well.
So just going back a second to a point you made about cell phones, I think cell phones have really been a problem for horror stories and horror movies.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things. It's like, well, just use your cell phone.
Uh-huh.
Like even the original Scream, like that didn't come out that long ago, but already that movie is like, I mean, they had cell phones, but people were, it's so funny when you watch the movie now because they're like explaining cell phones.
Oh yeah, and they all
like,
say
what?
cellular phone.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy had a cellular phone and he's the only one in class who has one, so.
Yeah. So it's just funny how they have to kind of work around cell phones these days. It takes a very creative mind. Or you just see more things set in the past, which
yeah,
is happening a lot too.
absolutely.
All right, very good. So anything else about Meddling, kids, or you got something else to tell us about?
Read it. Pick it up. I got mine at a used copy at the Harvard bookstore. It's an excellent, excellent book.
Sounds like a very strong recommendation.
Yes.
Very good.
The next book I want to read, or
Gonna read to us the
Yeah.
whole book? It looks pretty thick. I don't know if we have time.
One. So this book is called What the Hell Did I Just Read? By David Wong. This is actually the third book in a series. The first one was John Dies at the End, which was turned into a movie on Netflix now. Highly recommend. One of my favorite movies. Directed by the same man who did Phantasm. So on the one hand, it's like, I understand this is the third book. You don't really need to have read the first two in order to enjoy this book. There are times where they're even like, hey, remember that time we met that girl made out of snakes? And for someone who read the book, you're like, I do remember that. That was wild. But it doesn't matter. David Wong is one of my favorite new authors. I really think he finds a good balance between absolute anarchy. He's able to combine like Looney Tunes-esque writing styles and things that are happening with gut-punching emotional cores that really help kind of bind everything together. I'm actually going to read just a couple short things to give you an idea of his writing style and who the character of the book is. David Wong. The author himself goes by David Wong.
So his name really David Wong, or that's just his pen name and also the character's name?
Yes.
Yes, it's his pen name, and yes, it's the character's name.
Yes.
Okay. We're with you now.
And he's a real dummy in the most not charming but fun to read ways, and also one of like he is kind of the worst part of you in a very funny way. So this is from this book. So he's talking about how people send him stuff because he and his friend John of John Dies at the End fame are known across the country as being these people who have these powers. And so anytime there's anything that they say is haunted, they just kind of mail it to them for them to deal with. And they do have these weird abilities to be able to like see or hear things in different kind of universes, but they are also just like unemployable dirtbags who don't know how to do anything.
All right.
So he has been gifted a piñata that the owner says is indestructible. And here's where it begins. Again, that's pretty weird, but what possible use is that to anybody? It's just a waste of perfectly good candy. If you're saying we should give it to the government so they can mimic its witchcraft or whatever to make better body armor for the military, I'm thinking you trust the government way more than I do. If it's a bona fide object cursed with black magic, handing it over to the feds would be like giving a toddler a chainsaw to cut his birthday cake with. Oh, you're probably saying, so it's better off in your apartment? I don't know, dude. Do you want it? Send me your address. You pay for shipping. This book, What the Hell Did I Just Read, is about David Wong and his friend John being alerted by the authorities that a child has gone missing. And they're like, what does that have to do with us? You are the police. You should handle this. And they're like, yeah, but also there's this like floating orb that we're not going to touch. So you handle it. Something along those lines. So they show up and eventually they find the child, but the child is not right. And the parents are kind of like, he keeps talking a bunch of jibber jabber that is really freaking me out. And so they have to go and sort out where their child was taken, what happened to them, and is this an intercosmic, interuniversal type of situation or not. And of course it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know what to do about it.
And John dies at the end.
In the first one, it's
so
actually
he's
really more the middle. He comes back. He's fine.
Oh, okay. I had a confused look on my face.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
That movie is on Netflix, and I 100%.
I saw. Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, but I saw that it was on there, and I was like, oh.
It's so good. It's literally one of my favorite movies. It is like a Looney Tunes horror movie with just bonkers things happening. So to give you an idea of who would want to be friends with David Wong after reading what you've just read, this is a passage from the same book from John's point of view, where they talk to the father who reported his child missing, and they're like, oh, did you see anything strange in the days before? And he talks about how a very disgusting man came up to him one day, just walked up to his house and was like, how much for your kid? And was really gross. You find out that this was one of many disguises that someone was wearing, particularly to frighten this man and make him like worried for his child because of some mind games that he's playing.
Okay.
You want to fight a kitty diddler in a dildo store parking lot? I understand that completely. I've done that myself. But are you sure you want to fight a sexual deviant who is also a wizard? That's how you wind up with a cursed asshole.
Seems like my kind of lighthearted approach to horror and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like I'm doing a terrible job expressing at all what these books are or why people should read them. But, if that passage doesn't sell you on this, I don't know. This isn't the book for you then.
Yes. These are not full book reports, of course. We understand that. But, no, you're just giving us a little sample. That's all.
Yeah.
And it's good because I don't usually talk about books because, honestly, I don't read a lot of novels. I usually read, like, true crime books or biographies, those kind of things. It's not so much that I'm anti-novel. There's some that I really like. But, I don't know. Sometimes if I don't know it, like, I'm like, I don't know.
That's how I felt as well. I am a book hoarder. I love to buy books that I think are interesting, but it's really hard for me to devote time to reading. And in general, if I'm going to sit down and like say, okay, well, I'm going to read now, it's hard for me to justify reading something for fun. So when I started having to use the trains to commute to work, I started actually reading a lot of these. And I was like, oh yeah, fun is fun. Fun is good. And so I'm just really excited about them. And I hope other people enjoy them as well. Maybe pick them up. Maybe. Yeah. We've talked about cursed assholes, exorcisms, slashers, and Scooby-Doo. I feel like those are all very like core spooky type of things. The last book that I'm going to talk about very briefly is not definitively spooky, but it has parts that are very frightening to me. This is more along the lines of kind of the apocalypse and how we deal with survival situations. This book is the latest book from Jeff VanderMeer, who wrote Annihilation and the Area X trilogy. If you saw the movie Annihilation, I recommend reading the book because they're completely different beasts, to be quite honest. But this one is called Born, Borne, and this is a lot more fun and straightforward than his Area X trilogy, which were very dry science fiction. This takes place in a world where everything has gone to shit, and everyone is just kind of like trying to survive. They're mostly scavengers living in, you know, cities that have been blown up 7 times. For whatever reason, you don't 100% know. It's a little bit like Night of the Living Dead in the sense of like something has happened. You can kind of see some symptoms, but in Night of the Living Dead, you don't know why they came back. In this one, you don't know what the cause of the apocalypse was. You just know that you're kind of living in it now. And where this takes place in this particular city, it's run by a gigantic flying bear named Mord. So they're always, on the one hand, like just trying to survive the city and like find food and find water that's not contaminated, and living with this amazing biotechnology and all of these gadgets and things that are so cool. And they're also like hiding from a bear. So it's very frightening to me to really be kind of confronted with that dichotomy of like, no matter what, no matter how far into the future we get, if there are still living creatures that are bigger than us, we're going to be scared of them. Because there's just nothing more visceral than having a giant bear come after you.
Well, a flying bear, too.
And a flying bear. So, yeah, in this world, there's all kinds of technological advancements, and there is, quote-unquote, the Company. Very similar to the alien film, The Company. It's just, like, kind of sort of evil and made a bunch of abominations, including this giant flying bear, Mord. And now everyone is subject to his whims, so to speak. And it's fascinating because you see there's some portion of the population that is like, oh, well, Mord is God, and we're gonna start worshiping him and like doing whatever he says. And then others are like, he's a giant bear, you should be scared of him. And then there's the Company, who are kind of they still exist, but they are also subject to his whims. They kind of do whatever he tells them to do. And I think there's some kind of communication between the two, even if it's just like, I'm going to stick my snout in here and eat whatever you have, and as long as you fill my belly, I won't just destroy you. So the plot of this revolves around the main character, Rachel. Her type of scavenging is that she will actually crawl onto his fur and try to like find things that just like got stuck in it. And one day she finds this little palm-sized piece of biotech, and she takes it home, and it starts to grow. It just kind of very slowly gets bigger and bigger, and turns into a vase-like kind of plant-ish living creature that becomes somewhat of her surrogate child. But because it is technology based, even though it does very much develop its own personality, it also is uncontrollable. And as it grows, it becomes clear that he himself poses a threat to her, and they have to kind of like figure out what's going to happen.
It's always something.
But I love this book. I really recommend this book. I recommend Area X as well. Again, that's a lot drier. This is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun, and it goes it's a very fast read, but there are times when it really does confront you with some very frightening, spooky questions of like, what does it mean to be a human? How human are you if you are just living and surviving, as opposed to like building anything or taking care of someone? In that vein, there's this passage where she talks about she was scavenging and she picked something up, and a woman kind of comes after her and says like, oh, that's mine, and starts running after her, and Rachel has to defend herself, so she throws rocks at this woman. hits her right in the head twice. I just wanted to look at it, she said, puzzled, as she kept putting a hand to her wound and taking it away again. Her eyes began to glaze over. Just a look is all I wanted. I didn't stay to help her or hurt her. I left. Did she die? Did I kill her? And if I did, am I a murderer?
So those are the kind of things that makes you think about. And what does it mean?
Yeah, if your survival
for
depends...
humanity, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
We're all going to die.
That is true. It is on the agenda.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it as far as your books go. So let me tell you about 10 of my picks. No, I'm just kidding.
I'd be thrilled.
Although, you know what I will recommend, actually, just because I happen to see it over your head? There is a book called The Dead Travel Fast by Eric Nuzum. Maybe that's how you pronounce it. Could be Nuzum. I don't know. But anyway, it's basically his travel log of traveling to Transylvania. Sometimes you see those trips advertised, you know, in a brochure or something. I go to a lot of horror conventions, and they're always, you know, Transylvania trips or whatever. So he, again, kind of a lighthearted approach, like I would probably take, talks about going there and the other people that are on the trip and, you know, how they dealt with them. I think one of them ended up being on a reality TV show afterwards. So it's just, he's kind of a normal person in a weird circumstance. But that's always what I think about when I do go to these horror conventions, because it takes all types, right?
Yeah.
And I look around and I'm like, these people. Like,
I'm not like one of these people.
Yeah, and then I have to remind myself, no, you're here too. So, like, yes, there are levels, but my ex, she used to get complimented. Like, if she went to a horror convention, like, whoever we were going, like, to get something signed or whatever, they would always say how beautiful she was. Mm-hmm. And she was a beautiful woman. But I told her, I was like, but look at what else they're looking at all day long. I'm just saying.
Don't think too highly of yourself, all right? No.
Yeah.
But it's true. That's one of the reasons why it can sometimes be difficult to be a female-bodied human at either conventions or at comic book stores. I'm very lucky here in Boston. Everyone is pretty chill. Like, there's, you know, everyone is. I'm very lucky that here in Boston that's not an issue. But I've gone to many a metal show, mm-hmm. and sometimes, you know, especially if I'm like waiting in line to get merch, it's like, who's this? And I'm like, oh, look at this wall, it's so interesting. I'm just gonna stare at this wall until you stop standing so close to me.
Yeah. I don't know, I've never gotten that approach. Like how that I mean, like, well, yes, it's never happened to me, but I also mean that I've never understood why someone, a male, would take that approach of, like, leering at somebody or, like...
And you can be like, oh, hey, nice patch.
Right.
Hey, nice pin.
Yeah, there's a way to handle it.
If I stare hard enough.
Well, good example, what I was talking about earlier. When I met you, I wasn't like, hey, what's going on? Like, you know, and I didn't try to force anything, but, like, I found out about you, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, she's taken. Cool. And I was like, yeah, you know, like I said, I kind of had something going on with somebody else anyway. But yeah, so anyway, I don't know. I learned on an episode that we did that I'm not particularly a creepy person.
That is true, yes.
So I'm happy about that.
I
was worried that I was, but we kind of went through it, and it turned out that I'm not.
I think everyone should worry a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, am I a creep? And then, like, you know, use that as a way to think about your actions. Because even as a small woman, there are still things, like, it would be totally creepy if I stared at someone, which I did in high school one time, where it was just like, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. And then we went from having 3 classes together to none, because I was accidentally a super creep. So, you know, anyone can be creepy. It's a behavior you should think about. But no, you have never made me uncomfortable, for which I am very grateful.
Well, very good. All right, let's wrap it up there. Let me just remind everyone once again, check out the website, spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter at spookyasshit. You can also email me with any comments or show ideas or anything else. at spookyasshit@gmail.com. And you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. So once again, Lil Beesty, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time, don't be afraid.